Why can't black people just order fried chicken? This must be traced back to the early 19th century in America when black slaves were nominally freed, but the prerequisite was that they had enough money to redeem themselves. However, white masters did not want to see their former slaves now being equal to them, so they tried every way to prevent them from making money, forbidding and restricting them from raising cattle, sheep and large cattle. This led to black people only being able to raise chickens, the cheapest type of poultry, to supplement the large amount of calories consumed by hard labor, so they ate a lot of chicken. But today, cheap solid chicken is considered by racists to be the best food for black people. Today, I want to introduce one of the movies that you must see in your life. The movie is also adapted from a true story. This is not only an excellent work on anti-racism, but also gives countless people who have watched it the courage to face bad things. Far in life and change himself, the main character named Tony, a security guard at a nightclub, in other words a puncher with fists and a skillful way of handling things. He solved all the troubles for the nightclub until one day the nightclub had to temporarily close for repairs, which also left him unemployed as the only breadwinner in the family, so Tony had to find a way to earn money. He even entered an eating contest to win $50 competing with the biggest eater in town. When he got home, he proudly told his wife he spent $50 to enter the hot dog eating contest. That person ate 24 like a monster. His wife asked him, "Are you crazy to lose $50?" Tony replied, "I ate 26 the next morning. Just woke up angry." Tony saw the black repairman come to the house, used his wife's family cup, just sent the repairman away. He threw the cup in the trash. Yes, he was racist against black people. Suddenly an old friend called. The job introduction said that there was a doctor who was recruiting a driver. Tony didn't think much and dressed neatly and went to the interview. He was taken to a luxurious room, but the person who appeared before his eyes was a black man. Yes, it was the boss he was about to interview. This immediately disappointed Tony. This man went straight to the point. His name was John. He was a pianist. He would next be touring the South, where racism was the most serious. So to protect his life and avoid unnecessary trouble, he wanted to hire a bodyguard and driver. After looking at Tony's profile, John felt that he was the most suitable candidate. He had good skills and could handle things skillfully. However, Tony felt very uncomfortable thinking that the boss was a black man. However, out of respect for his old friend who had introduced him, he decided to offer an exorbitant salary to make John give up. However, the surprising thing was that early the next morning, John called and agreed to Tony's terms. $120 a week, equivalent to a month's salary. His previous, and the job was simply to take Joe to the performance venue as scheduled. Tony was extremely happy. Before leaving, John's company paid Tony half of his salary in advance and a copy of the Green Book, because in America at that time many black people relied on the content of this book to avoid unnecessary trouble. In other words, without this book, black people could say it was difficult to move even a single print. His wife came to see Tony off and asked him to return before Christmas, and so these two strange men started a mysterious tour. As soon as they left, Joe told Tony two things he had to do for him. One was the piano he played had to be a sway. Two was every night PH had to prepare for him a sharp tea cut. Tony sat in front eating breakfast that his wife prepared for him while smoking. He was a talkative man, so his mouth kept dancing non-stop. I endured for a long time, finally told him to stop smoking. "Please put out the cigarette." "YCA and I breathe. What are you saying? I'm inhaling smoke into my lungs. Feel thanks." On the way, Tony stopped the car to go to the toilet, not forgetting to take his wallet in the car. This made John in the car very angry. That night they arrived at the first stop. Tony accidentally discovered John's band members flirting with girls downstairs, while John could only sit alone on the balcony drinking a bottle of sharp company. Lonely before the next day's performance, John found Tony and told him that after the performance we would often attend some parties and events later. When talking, pay attention to your expression. Inside are all elegant upper class people who unexpectedly, after listening, Tony said, "I don't care about them whether they want to listen or not, is up to you." To use honorifics when talking. "Boss, why are you making it difficult for me?" "Because you can do better." The performance quickly began. Through the introduction of the host, Tony finally understood why this black pianist was invited to tour. He first performed on stage on the floor, busy gambling with other waiters, because he saw the scene. After the performance, he called Tony to his side and said, "If you need money you can come find me. If you win it would be more fun. If you lose then play cards and dice. I have never lost to you. Kneeling on the floor like that is the winner. How about me? Everyone is playing, they just have no choice." "But you have." Tony pondered carefully. These words seemed a bit right. That night they returned to their accommodation in the letter too. When he was only 2 years old, at the age of 18, he was invited by conductor T.H. Fiedler to performed with the Boston Pop Orchestra in his first concert in his life. He has a PhD in psychology, music and religion. In the past 14 months he has performed twice at the White House. He is a true master of the art. John is passionate about playing the piano with a wonderful melody that amazed everyone present. Tony also really felt his extraordinary talent. However, immediately after that he kneeled his wife. In addition to asking after, usually Tony first mentioned John. He said that when he watched John play the piano he completely forgot about him as a black man, and also asserts that he is a genius, but he just doesn't understand why John has both fame and money but still seems unhappy. The next day the two continue on their way. When they pass a forest station, Tony is attracted by the beautiful small stones in the store. He thought about buying one for his wife, but as soon as he saw the price he gave up the idea. However, when he bent down he discovered a stone fell on the ground. He instinctively bent down to pick it it up and put it in his pocket very naturally. This action was accidentally seen by a member of John's band. When John found out about it, he asked Tony to return the stone, but Ton said that he picked it up from the ground. Why should he return it? Because seriously, if he didn't return it we wouldn't go on. Although he didn't volunteer, but Tony finally chose to compromise. Not long after they arrived at the next stop of the show, Tony checked the piano at the scene as John requested as usual, but when he arrived what caught his eye was a piano full of noise inside, so he looked for the staff on site to ask about the situation. According to the performance contract, they had to provide the piano sway, but the staff looked indifferent and said, "Why do you need to clean this piano? Is enough for that black guy to play." As a result, the next second Tony didn't say a word, slapped him straight in the face. Then the show started looking at John on stage. Tony stood beside him happily like a child. Maybe even he himself didn't realize that John had gradually entered his heart. In the letters to his wife, the stories about John became more and more. On the way to the third stop, they passed by a fried chicken shop. Tony immediately bought a big bucket and started eating deliciously in the car. Then he gave the chicken leg to John in the back to eat. "It was really delicious, but I don't want to dirty my carpet. My mother wouldn't let me dirty the carpet." Tony persuaded for a long time. Finally John had to use his finger to pick up the chicken leg and carefully opened his mouth, eat the first piece of fried chicken in his life. Then he was also conquered because of the crispy taste of this fried chicken bone. "How about?" Tony opened the window and threw it out. Joe smiled and did the same and threw the bone out the window, but immediately after that Tony threw the cup out. Seeing that, John asked Tony to go back and pick it up because the bone would be eaten by animals or decompose naturally and the cup would just pollute the environment. At night they went to Kentucky. The further south they went, the more serious the racism became. The two could only stay at different hotels. Don stayed in a small shabby motel as usual. He sat alone drinking whiskey. However, with his formal suit he looked out of place among the other black people around. A black man next to him wanted to invite him to play ball to avoid awkwardness. He lied that he was going to meet friends. Not long after there was an urgent knock on Tony's door. It was the band members. They said that John was in trouble. The two of them immediately ran there. They went to a bar and saw John drunk being beaten up by a group of white men. At this time Ton Y spoke up, asked them to stop, but the other side relied on the majority to start provoking them. He even pulled out a knife to threaten. Seeing that, Tony slowly put his hand behind his back and made a gun gesture. Finally, he was able to take John away. When he went out, Tony seriously told John that from now on, wherever he went, he had to go with him because the road ahead would become more and more dangerous. Like an injured child, he obediently agreed. The next day, the performance took place as usual and still received enthusiastic applause. But not long after leaving, the car broke down. Seeing that, Tony got out of the car to fix it. John also got out of the car to breathe fresh air, but when he turned back, they saw black brothers working hard under the sun. Like few dot, they suddenly stopped and looked at John at the same time. John's eyes also seemed to be thinking about something. Although they were all black, they had two completely opposite fates. This made John feel very uncomfortable. At the fourth stop before the performance, John wanted to go to the toilet but was stopped by the butler, who pointed to the temporary toilet outside and said that was where he could use it. John flatly refused and said that Mr. They would return to the hotel. On the way back, Tony didn't understand and asked why he didn't settle it somewhere on the side of the road. John said that he had his own self-respect. After the performance he still politely shook everyone's hand. Tony told the musicians in the band, "If it were me I would have run away." At this time another musician came up and said that John could enjoy the admiration of thousands of people in the north and receive many times more salary here, but he still chose to tour in the South. His purpose was only to break the prejudice and discrimination of white people towards black people. These words made Tony immediately change his view of John. The next day Tony wrote a letter to his wife. John stood next to him looking at the naive words and spelling mistakes like an elementary school student. On it hurriedly picked it up. See, indeed Tony's letter was like a meticulous record, only writing about the things he did and the things he ate every day. John couldn't stand it okay and say, "Let me help you close a little. Dear Dolores, when I think of you I remember the beautiful flat fields of Iowa. The distance between us makes me always miss you. Without you my time and experience would be meaningless." Then they came to the fifth stop. On the way, passing a clothing store, suddenly attracted by a suit in the glass, the two of them walked in to try on clothes, but the store owner pulled them back and said black people weren't allowed to try on clothes. Joe just smiled and left. Quietly Tony saw it all but couldn't do anything during the performance. That night he poured all his anger into the music and could only vent it this way. That night Tony was getting ready to go to bed when the phone rang on the other end saying he was in trouble. Arriving at the scene, Tony witnessed an unbelievable scene. The police were preparing to arrest John and the other man. Tony used money to bribe them to release John, but as soon as he got out John turned on him. Not only no thank you, Tony even blamed him for bribing the police. The two then had a big argument and ended up not being happy. The next day they arrived at the Friday stop. Tony happened to meet two friends who were also Italian. They saw John next to Tony and started teasing Tony in Italian, saying if he wanted to make money he could come to them. "Why do you have to work for this black guy?" Tony didn't say anything, just said see you in the evening, but he didn't know that John actually understood Italian when Tony was about To go downstairs he found John standing at the door and said, "Seriously, I hope you won't go. I don't want to lose this friend. I will promote you and give you a raise right away." But Tony flatly refused. Looking at John in that moment, he looked like a helpless child. Tony then said, we agreed $120 a week plus other expenses." "We agreed, right? I won't go anywhere. I just went downstairs to tell them about this at this time." John felt extremely guilty towards Tony and his legs. "Sorry about last night." Tony said, "Don't bother. I've worked in nightclubs all my life. I know this world is complicated. Yes, this world is complicated, but when you really encounter it, how many people are willing to accept this complexity?" The next day the two of them continued their tour. At the intersection waiting for the bus, a girl next to them looked at them with disbelief, then called her boyfriend to come and see because it was a white man driving a black man. At that time in the American South this was completely impossible, but when the two of them were still surprised, Tony made a domineering international gesture. Next they finished their Saturday show. On the way back in the evening they encountered a light rain. Suddenly a police car stopped them. Tony got out of the car. The police told Tony, "This place is called SSS." He whispered, "The rule is after sunset black people are not allowed to stay here." And when the police saw John in his car, his face immediately changed and asked John to go out for a search, saying that he was also half black. This statement sparked Tony's anger. Then both were taken to the police station. John kept asking to call his lawyer. That was his right. Finally the police officer allowed him to call, but not long after a call came in. It was the local governor, the brother of the US president at that time. Tony was also shocked. After going out, Tony was very excited. This was enough for him to brag about for the rest of his life, but John was still very angry and felt ashamed. The two argued again. Tony said that every day he had to work hard and earn a living to support his family, while John was like a white king living in a high castle in the upper house. Compared to him, I was more like a black person. At this time John suddenly realized that in Tony's eyes black people were always the lower class. This immediately made John collapse. John stepped straight out of the car and ran into the heavy rain. Tony chased after him and asked, "Where are you going?" "Yes, I live in a castle, Tony. It was me. Rich white people invited me to play the piano to show that they had culture, but as soon as I finished playing and got off the stage I became the black man. They despised me. That was what they really wanted, and I had to endure it all alone. I was not accepted by my people nor by the white people. I was not even considered a man." "Tony, tell me what the hell I am." Tony tried to say something to comfort him, but the words wouldn't come out. They finally arrived at the last stop of the tour. The manager very politely arranged for John a messy storage room behind the kitchen as a dressing room. Tony and the other musicians in the band dinner at the restaurant, but after the dressing John was told that black people were not allowed to eat in the restaurant. This time John decided, "No more patience. Unless I was allowed to eat here there would be no show tonight." But according to the contract, if any of the shows were not completed, Tony would not get the rest of his pay. The manager completely ignored John's words and called him aside and give money. Tried to let Tony solve the problem. "Do you think you can bribe me? Please don't insult. If it wasn't for money you wouldn't work for black people." Right, don't stop it, Tony." John knew how much the remaining remuneration meant to Tony, so this time he gave the right to decide the performance to Tony. "If you agree then I will perform." But the next second Tony firmly took John away from it. Then the two found a small bar here full of black people. Under the strange eyes of everyone around they had a full meal. Then under Tony's encouragement John stepped onto the stage, sat in front of the old piano and started playing improvisation. This was the first time he performed for his compatriots. Everyone in the audience also danced to the music happily. Joe also sighed from the bottom of his heart. It seemed like he hadn't been able to relax like that for a long time, as if he had found himself again after leaving Bob's bar so Tony could fulfill his promise to his wife. John decided to return to New York immediately, but on the way snow began to fall heavily. John joked that Tony could take the stone he stole out and it could bless them to get to safety. It turned out that he had known for a long time that Tony would not return the stone. "Thank you. Now I feel much more secure." But they had not gone far when the car was stopped by the police again. However, this time it was a friendly reminder, and so, carrying this bit of warmth, the two finally returned to New York on the night of the birth. When they got out of the car, Tony invited John to come over to play, but John politely refused. He returned home. John left the housekeeper. When he got home, he picked up the berth and stayed in the big empty house. Staring at the lucky stone in his hand, he felt lonely. In another place, Tony's family was having a happy New Year's Eve dinner. The family asked him how he felt about working for that black guy. Tony listened and said seriously, "Don't call him that." His wife was surprised when she saw Tony's reaction. Suddenly someone knocked on the door. Tony hurriedly opened the door and it turned out to be John standing there holding a bottle of wine. There awkwardly Tony walked up to hug him and invited him into his house. He introduced to the family formally, "This is my best friend Dr. John S. Happy New Year." The movie won 5 Oscars including Best Picture at the 91st Academy Awards. Not only a story about friendship that transcends color barriers but also a powerful indictment against racism. Through the journey of Tony and John we see change and acceptance as well as the value of family and love no matter how complicated the world is. Humanity and understanding can always win. The movie is really good, so I still recommend everyone to watch the original movie. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the movie. What do you think of this movie? Please comment below.